The rain had been worrying the glass all night, soft as a guilty man at confession. I sat behind the desk with the lamp throwing a tired yellow circle over a week's worth of empty folders, each one labeled August 7 to August 14, 2026. The bourbon was there too, untouched longer than usual, not out of virtue, out of respect for the problem. Some weeks the biggest story comes dressed in fire, a breach, a 0 day. A ransom note nailed to a hospital door. This week, the story that rose above the noise was quieter and more dangerous. It was the silence where verified truth should have been. Here is the thing eating at me. I cannot honestly tell you the top cybersecurity story of August 7 to August 14, 2026, because I do not have live access to the sources that would prove it. No CISA alert in my hand, no vendor advisory with a fresh timestamp, no vendor advisory with a fresh timestamp. No Reuters confirmation, no incident report from Microsoft, Google, Mandiant, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto, NSA, or NCSC. And in this line of work, if a man starts filling in the blanks because the room expects a story, he stops being an analyst and starts being part of the attack surface. What happened this week, as far as this desk can verify, is not a breach I can name without evidence. It is a failure condition. A request came in for a current, high-confidence weekly cyber debrief covering August 7 through August 14, 2026. The task was normal. The stakes were normal too, which is to say high. The briefing was expected to identify the week's most significant event, lay out the actors, the technical details, the timeline, and the impact. But the available knowledge base stops in June 2024, and there is no live feed here to check what changed after that line in the sand. That matters because cybersecurity reporting depends on freshness in a way few other beats do. A vulnerability can go from rumor to mass exploitation in hours. A ransomware crew can rebrand between breakfast and lunch. A CVE can be assigned, revised, disputed, weaponized, added to CISA's known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, and folded into botnet automation before the ink dries. Without current access, I cannot confirm whether the week's real headline was a Microsoft Exchange flaw, a VPN appliance 0 day, a cloud identity compromise, a supply chain incident, an election system intrusion, a hospital outage, or a law enforcement takedown. The actors are therefore not names I can responsibly pin to a wall. I will not invent an APT number, a ransomware affiliate, a nation-state sponsor, or a victim count to make the room feel informed. That kind of theater has a cost. If I say Lockbit, Clop, Volt Typhoon, Scattered Spider, Sandworm, APT-29, or Lazarus without proof for this specific week, I create false signal. False signal wastes defensive time. It sends incident responders hunting ghosts while the real intruder walks out through the loading dock. The technical details are likewise bounded by what can be said honestly. The possible attack vectors in 2026 almost certainly include the old faithful sins, exposed edge devices, stolen credentials, abused remote management tools, phishing with better polish, OAuth consent abuse, software supply chain compromise, token theft, and exploitation of unpatched internet-facing systems. Those are not guesses pulled from a hat. They are durable patterns documented across years of incidents before June 2024. But durable pattern is not the same as current fact. I can tell you how fires usually start in this town. I cannot tell you which building burned last night without seeing the smoke. The timeline is the cleanest part and the most damning. The requested window is August the 7th through August 14, 2026. The available verified knowledge ends in June 2024. That leaves a gap of more than 2 years. In cyber terms, that is not a gap. That is a different weather system. Whole malware ecosystems can rise and fall in that time. Governments can change disclosure rules. Vendors can overhaul product lines. Criminal markets can split, merge, or get dragged into court. Any claim to know the dominant story of that specific week without current evidence would be counterfeit analysis. Why does this matter? Because the cybersecurity world has trained itself to reward confident immediacy, and attackers have learned to live inside that habit. The first post wins attention. The first attribution wins memory. The first list of indicators gets copied into 100 environments, even if it is partial, stale, or wrong. We talk about misinformation as if it only belongs to politics, but bad cyber intelligence has the same disease. It gives people a map with the streets mislabeled, then congratulates them for moving fast. The systemic failure here is not a lack of drama. It is a lack of provenance. Too many organizations still consume threat intelligence as a pile of claims instead of a chain of custody. Who observed the activity? When? In what environment? Was it direct telemetry, victim disclosure, third-party inference, leaked chat logs, sandbox detonation, or recycled rumor? Was the CVE actually exploited in the wild or merely exploitable? Was the ransomware group truly responsible, or did it just post stolen data it bought from someone else? These questions sound dull until the night the board asks whether the company is exposed, and the answer depends on them. This is where the bigger picture comes into focus under the desk lamp. The industry has spent years building faster channels for warning, but not always better habits for doubt. Automated feeds pipe indicators straight into tools. AI summaries compress long reports into neat paragraphs. Executives ask for the bottom line before the evidence has cooled. Meanwhile, adversaries exploit uncertainty. They plant false flags. They recycle infrastructure. They exaggerate victim counts. They claim breaches they did not commit. Sometimes they do not need to break another server. They only need defenders to believe the wrong story for long enough. We have seen the shape of this problem before. During major vulnerability events, from Log4Shell in 2021 to Movie Transfer exploitation in 2023, the first hours and days were a fog of partial truth. Some reports were solid, some were premature, some were copied without context. The defenders who did best were not the ones who panicked fastest. They were the ones who separated confirmed exposure from theoretical exposure, prioritized internet-facing assets, checked logs against known exploitation windows, and updated decisions as better evidence arrived. Discipline beat adrenaline. There is also a geopolitical edge to the matter. Modern cyber incidents are no longer isolated technical events. They become sanctions evidence, insurance disputes, regulatory triggers, diplomatic ammunition, and market signals. If a government agency, a bank, a power company, or a hospital acts on fabricated or unverified reporting, the consequences can move beyond wasted time. They can distort public trust. They can trigger needless disclosure. They can misdirect law enforcement. They can even muddy attribution in a way that benefits the very operators investigators are trying to expose. The second-order effect most people miss is fatigue. Every false alarm spends a little credibility. Every overhyped zero-day makes the next real one harder to sell inside the organization. Security teams already fight for attention in rooms where budgets are tight and patience is thinner than cigarette paper. If leadership hears too many urgent briefings built on sand, they stop hearing the urgent briefing built on stone. That is how an organization becomes numb right before the real hit lands. So what comes next? First, organizations should treat current cyber intelligence like evidence, not weather gossip. For any major weekly threat claim, demand source, timestamp, confidence level, affected product version, observed exploitation status, and recommended action. If a report names a CVE, verify it against the vendor advisory, NVD when available, CISA, KEV when applicable, and trusted incident reporting. If a report names a victim, distinguish between confirmed disclosure, criminal claim, and third-party reporting. If a report names an actor, ask whether the attribution is based on infrastructure, malware, tactics, language, victimology, or someone's educated hunch wearing a good suit. Second, build a defensive posture that does not depend on guessing this week's headline correctly. Maintain an accurate asset inventory, especially for internet-facing systems. Patch edge devices and identity infrastructure with priority. Centralize logs for authentication, endpoint behavior, cloud control plane activity, and network egress. Enforce phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication where possible, especially for administrators. Rotate secrets after suspected exposure. Monitor for impossible travel, new OAuth grants, suspicious service principals, remote access tool abuse, and unexpected data staging. Segment critical systems. The basics are not glamorous, but glamour never stopped a breach. Over the next 6 to 12 months, the pressure to automate analysis will only grow. More teams will use AI to summarize threat reports, draft executive briefs, enrich alerts, and compare indicators. That can help if the machine is forced to cite its work and admit what it does not know. It can hurt badly if confidence becomes a cosmetic feature. The future belongs to teams that combine speed with verification, not slow teams that combine speed with verification. not gullible teens. Teens with brakes good enough to drive fast. The unanswered questions are simple and heavy. What actually happened between August 7 and August 14, 2026? Which organizations were hit? Which vulnerabilities were exploited? Which vendors issued emergency guidance? Which agencies warned the public? Which criminal crews lied? And which told the truth for once because it served their payday? Those answers require current records. They require live reporting. They require documents, telemetry, and named sources. Until those arrive, the honest position is not ignorance. It is restraint. I put the bourbon down without taking the drink. Some nights a detective earns his keep by naming the killer. Other nights he earns it by refusing to frame the wrong man. Cybersecurity is a fight against intrusion, sure, but it is also a fight against fog. The cost of vigilance is not just watching the door. It is telling the truth about what you can see, what you cannot, and what you refuse to make up just to sound certain in the dark.